Hey builders, here's an in-depth tutorial video showing you what comes in my new Dejarik light kit. In this video I will show you everything you need to use this kit to make your own table lights. Alright, so here's everything that'll be in your raw light kit when you open it up. We have a bag of 30 reflective metal tubes. I've got these 30, I'll probably throw more than 30 little printed inserts that are going to go in the tubes. I've got a vial of really thick CA glue. This is actually this MaxiCure extra thick CA glue. I didn't want you guys to have to buy a whole bottle of this, so I include it with the kit. I put just enough in this tube for you to do the job, and then I put some of these specialty toothpicks that make the glue application a little easier. I've got a bag of electronics. There's some diffused white LEDs, as well as the resistors to go with them, and then some single row pin headers that will break apart. There's the red and blue acrylic discs, 15 of each, so you can put your lights together, and then some diffusion stickers. These are circular cut stickers that we're going to use to diffuse these acrylic discs just perfectly. And then this PCB of all 30 of the lights that this kit makes that we'll be soldering everything to. You're going to need to provide a nice fine-tipped soldering iron, a pair of flush cutters, a decent pair of snippers like that, and then possibly some thick masking tape or painter's tape that we'll use to hold the components on as we solder them. Alright, so we'll start by soldering up this PCB. So you're going to need these printed inserts, as well as all the stuff that came out of the electronics bag, the resistors, your LEDs, and these pin headers. So first I'm going to start by populating this whole thing with resistors. So you'll see here at the top of the PCB there's this like cylindrical shape here. That's where all of our resistors are going to go. So we just break them off of this guy, and then I stick one end in, then I bend and I go into the other hole, push them down so they're nice and flat, and move on. Alright, so that took me about probably about 5 or 6 minutes to do all those, and we end up with this forest of stuff on the end of the back there. They're all nice and flat, but just to make sure they stay put while I solder them, I'm going to take a piece of masking tape. I'm going to just put that over these. That way they all stay nice and flat while I'm working on them. So it's very difficult to get our iron in the middle of all this mess to try and solder these because of the forest of pins there. So the best way to do this is to go around the outside edge, and then we're going to snip all those, and then we'll be able to move in a little more, and so on until it's finished. So I'll show you how that goes. Alright, so I soldered all the ones around the perimeter of the board. Now I'm going to take my flush cutters and just cut all those off. Alright, so I've cut all those off. I'm just left with these ones in the middle. I'm going to do that again. I'm just going to do the ones around the perimeter. Alright, now we're left with just 6 boards in the middle, so those I can do in one go. Alright, they're all soldered and snipped, and now I can peel my tape off, and there's all our resistors. Now we'll move on to our pin headers. So you've got these single row pin headers included in the kit, and you want to break those off into sections of 2 each, so you can get your flush cutters and just snip off sections of 2, and we'll need 30 of those. Alright, so I've got those all cut up. Now I'm going to stick them onto the PCB in these little rectangles here. Alright, so I've got them all in there, but they're pretty loose, and if I just flip it over, they'll all fall out. So what you need to do is you need to get a piece of rigid wood, or maybe a drink coaster, or in your diffusing labels, there should be a piece of cardstock that you can use. It's just a little flimsier than I'd like it to be. But what you do is you can lay that on top, apply some even pressure from the middle. See that? Rotate my camera. And what I do is I lay it on the edge of my table, and I just slide it in, and they're all there ready to be soldered. So I will do that next. Alright, so next we're going to assemble our LEDs, and for that we're going to need the LEDs and these little white printed tube inserts. And we're going to insert the LEDs into these. To do that, you want to make sure that, we like to call these Cyclops skulls, you want to make sure that the eye of the Cyclops is at the top. And when you're inserting an LED, they have to be inserted the right direction. So if you look at this, your LED has a long stem and a short stem. The long stem needs to go to the left. So we're going to insert it just in this little slot right here, like so. And then I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to go ahead and pre-assemble all these so it'll make our jobs a little easier. Alright, so I've got all these loosely assembled. Now I just need to put them on my board. We're going to be working on the side that doesn't have the resistors on it. And you're going to see there's a square and a circle on each of these. The square is the long stem on our LED, the positive stem. So make sure that when you're putting these on, the long stem goes into the square. And if you did that right, when we squish it all down, you should see the cutouts on either side of these just fit perfectly for where our resistors are. If it doesn't go on that way, then something must be backwards. So I'm just going to put all these onto the board now. Alright, so I have all those on there now. We just want to make sure they're all nice and flat and that the prints are touching the PCB. It's also a good time to look and see if any of our long and short stems are mixed up. So I look good there, all the longs are on the left. Alright, so flip this over again, we can use that piece of cardstock. Now we want to make sure all these are nice and flat and pushed down, so I like to jiggle it back and forth and just make sure everything's nice and snug. And now comes the sort of tricky part. So we'll need to solder all these just the way they sit. And to do that, what I prefer is to have the resistor facing me, because these pin headers can easily be melted if your soldering iron touches the pin header. And you want to have your iron straight up and down. And what we're going to do is, I'll start over here. So with my iron straight up and down, I'm not touching anything. I'm just going to touch the pad I want to solder. Bring in my solder. There we go. Same over here. Straight up and down. Just touch the pad. Like so. And we didn't melt anything, and we didn't touch our resistor, and so on. So we're going to move over. So on and so forth. Now we'll just snip off all the stems from the LEDs. Alright, so now that our board is all assembled, we're done with the soldering portion of that. We can go ahead and break this PCB apart so that we've got individual lights. Alright, so now that our lights are all broken up and assembled, if you're like me, you might want to see if it's working correctly and you assembled it correctly. And if so, you're going to need a 5-volt source. For those of you that are using my controller board, we can plug them into the LED spots on either end. And a double-sided DuPont cable. The back of your LED has some polarity to it. You'll see there's a positive and negative spot on that header pin. So just make sure that the positive is going to red and the negative is going to black. And then on your controller board, same thing, there's polarity. You're going to see a positive and negative row. You want the negative to be toward the outside of your board, and the positive to be toward the inside. And plug it in on pins 2 through 12, because when you first power your board on, pins 1 and 13 actually won't be on, so if I plug it into one of these, it should turn on every couple seconds. There it is. So that's working as expected. Alright, so we're almost ready to start assembling our light tubes, but first we want to put diffusion stickers on each of these acrylic discs. So I recommend you peel the backing, this protective sticker, off of one side of all of your discs. I'd leave one side on just so that it doesn't get scratched up, or if we get messy with the glue, it doesn't mess up our good side. So just peel one side of the sticker off of each of these, and then get your diffusion stickers and start peeling those off. So you'll end up with a circle like that. And center it as best you can onto the acrylic light. Smooth it down, just like so. Alright, now that we have all of our diffusion stickers on, we're ready to glue them to our metal tubes. Some of them might look a little rough, like some differences in color when you stick the sticker on that, but don't worry about any of that. Once we get them glued to the tube and they're lit up, you won't notice any of those weird inconsistencies. So next we're going to need our metal tubes, as well as the glue and toothpicks. And I'm actually going to use this paper that we use from our diffusion stickers to put my glue on, because it's a nice slick surface that the glue doesn't really stick to. Alright, so we'll take our glue and we'll put some onto that slick paper where we peeled off one of the labels. Just put a nice blob there. Alright, and then we're going to take our fancy toothpick, and I'm going to use the blade side of the toothpick, not the brush side. You can use the brush side if you want, but I just find it easier to use this particular side for this job. Take a disc and tube, and we want our tube as centered as we can get it on the disc. We want to put some light pressure around the rim. I wouldn't press down straight, or you might find it sticks to your finger like that. We really don't want this tube moving left to right or up and down or anything during this process. So, alright, so I'm going to get it mostly centered. Get some glue on my toothpick. Put some light pressure on that tube and just lightly put some glue around the rim there. I start by putting it around half of the disc. Then I find the surface tension is enough to where I can kind of pick it up, flip it around quickly, drop it, and keep at it. So once you've had those drying for like 15 or 20 minutes, you might find they kind of get this ugly, super gluey haze. Maybe you made some mistakes where they're around the edge. And if that bothers you, I mean, I might be sloppier than some of you doing this, but you can take a cloth, a microfiber cloth, or just a regular cloth with some acetone on it, and clean that up. Just twist it around in there. It gets rid of all that ugly white haze, and it cleans up the edge pretty nice. It's probably best to leave the paper protective film on there just so you don't spread it around, but as you can see, this one's all gunked up. Twist it around the acetone, it makes it nice and clean there. Gets rid of my spills and cleans up that edge pretty decent. Alright, so now we're ready to glue our inserts into the backs of the tubes, like so. Push them in nice and flush. So to do that, I actually like using the brush side of these toothpicks because they retain a lot of the glue in them. And you just put a nice big blob on the printed part. Probably just one side is good enough. Stick it into the tube. I like rotating it around so the glue gets good coverage. Get it nice and flush. And that's it. Alright, so now that our lights are all assembled, it's time to peel off that protective layer. And they're ready to plug in. These kits will be available soon for pre-order. If any of this process seemed a little too daunting, I'll also have some upgrade options where you can have me solder and glue them for an additional fee. In the meantime, you can find more information about these kits in the Dejarik Builders group. Thanks for watching.